Super Smash Bros. Brawl is sort of like the best game in the series. A lot of people will disagree, thinking that, well, more is better, so Brawl can't possibly be the best. But of course, in terms of modding, Brawl has to be the most advanced of them all, getting frequent full mods like Project M and many others that attempt to improve the gameplay or to fill up on characters and stages. But this video isn't about the overwhelming possibilities you have by adding more stuff to the game. I want to talk about the original Brawl experience, why I'm interested in it, and how I can improve it by using simpler yet very useful mods. I guess you can chalk it up to nostalgia for wanting to revisit Brawl, but the game is still pretty special to me for a lot of reasons. I think it improved pretty much everything it could over Melee. You know, it has a better way to take screenshots, it has replays, widescreen, online matches, third-party characters, a story mode, and of course a bigger roster. I know a lot of people dislike the slower flow of the gameplay when compared to Melee, but I play casually, usually with the Wii remote. I don't really care about the random tripping and stuff like that. It doesn't break the game for me. But anyway, when the game came out, most of my friends from school had it, and because of the online feature, we played against each other all the time. Outside of Habbo Hotel, it was my first real online gaming experience, and kinda my last. I've never been into online gaming. I think it's a huge time sink and it can be pretty stressful. Definitely not my approach to games. But to me, Brawl actually served its secondary purpose, which was to get people buying more Nintendo games. I know I complain about how the Virtual Console games were just a big advertisement for the classic controller and I never succumbed to it, but Brawl actually succeeded in getting me to try more Nintendo games. I like to call it the Smash Brothers effect. It doesn't matter how lame or obscure the series or character is, if you put it in Smash Brothers, people will immediately think it's cool. But Melee had one problem. Nearly all of the cool stuff it references is from the NES, Super NES, and Nintendo 64 era. And back then, I didn't have internet access. I didn't even have a computer. If I got interested in checking out Earthbound, I simply wouldn't be able to find it in any store. So Melee was more like Nintendo 101. Brawl was actually much more effective because the Game Boy Advance and the DS were both being sold in stores, and the NES, Super NES, and Nintendo 64 games were being sold again through the Wii Shop channel. Brawl even had demos of a dozen Virtual Console games. In fact, checking out Ocarina of Time here is genuinely what got me interested in playing the game, having heard about it for years from friends and even from Melee. However, I didn't actually buy Ocarina of Time from the Wii Shop because I saw a video of someone trying it out and I was shocked to see that it still had the classic controller advertisement even though this game got released twice on the GameCube. I already had a bad time with Super Mario World, so I didn't want to risk going through that again. And even though my TV was 4x3 back then, so this didn't really affect me, I was a bit confused as to why the Virtual Console demos, aka the masterpieces, all supported widescreen correction. But when you bought them on the Wii Shop channel, they only supported 4x3 mode. That sounds like false advertising to me. The Virtual Console kinda sucked, but yeah, the games themselves are actually quite good. And going back to the games, I must have gone past Hotel Dusk and Trace Memory all the time at GameStop or EV Games. But after playing Brawl, I truly got interested in knowing more about these games, and eventually I ended up buying them. Hotel Dusk became one of my favorite games on the DS, and Trace Memory was good enough to get me to import the European version of the sequel, Another Code R. Sonic's debut in Smash also played a huge part in why I have fond memories of the game. I'm sure people will disagree, again, but this was like the best era for Sonic, the aftermath of Sonic's presence on Nintendo hardware, resulting in things like Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and more people finally coming to terms with the 4Kids voice actors. Sonic's place in the roster actually felt earned. Now you know why I still appreciate this game, so let's get to the technical stuff. This game does a lot of unusual things in terms of being a Wii game. The official developer's manual for the Wii mentions that save files cannot change size the moment they are created, and they cannot be bigger than 16 megabytes. This is because the internal storage space of the Wii is shared by every other Wii game that saves data. Brawl has the ability to save screenshots and replays to the actual save file and not just the SD card. So to get around the limit of not being able to increase or decrease the size of the save file, they just went ahead and made it a 16 megabyte save file. This isn't such a big deal, and I don't really have a solution for this right now. But the manual also mentions that WiiWare games cannot exceed 40 megabytes for the same reasons as the save file. But Brawl takes advantage of the 40 megabyte limit to store common files. Think of it like the data install option that some PSP games have. The main reason for Brawl doing this is to speed up character swapping during gameplay. A lot of the characters in this game swap. The problem is that it installs this data as temporary files, so every time you launch the game or reset or load up any of the masterpieces, the game has to wait for about a minute to get all those files back into the internal memory. So between this and the save file, the game uses up 56 megabytes of precious space. But more importantly, it forces the game to have a very slow initial load time, and it's writing 40 megabytes of data to flash memory, which may or may not matter in the long run. I mean, I've booted this game since 2009 and I have a power count of over 500. You know, the damage is done. But what really does matter to me is the loading time. I've had a broken disk drive for years, so to get into Brawl I use a hard drive, which should be much faster than the disk drive. So it kinda sucks that because of the data install, loading into the game still takes the same amount of time and doesn't benefit from the faster USB speed. Luckily, Brawl was programmed to not care about the temporary files if they don't exist. The game will just read the files from the disk. So by removing only 2 instructions, we can make the game boot in a little less than 10 seconds without really affecting anything, since character swapping will still be fast enough for those files. Another problem with the base game is that it doesn't support SD cards bigger than 2 GB. Even though a code for SDHC support was eventually created, codes disappear when you reset the game or enter the Virtual Console demos. A simple way around this is to use a program that can patch the codes into the executable so that it always works from an ISO. But this has some problems. If you decide to load your own codes from the USB loaders menu, it will break the original codes, so you would still need to include the SDHC code every time you want to use other codes. I found this limitation to be unnecessary and decided to port the code to empty space in the executable. That way SDHC support is native and no longer relies on cheat codes to work. I find SDHC support to be crucial because it allows you to use the file patch code with a bigger SD card, giving you access to easy modding. What? You don't want to listen to Calling to the Night anymore? Then let's replace it with the undeniable Nanamizuki classic Koi no Yoku Shiryoku. The final thing I want to talk about is dual audio. I have no problem with the voice acting in this game, I think it's really good, but from a pretty young age, Sonic DX introduced me to the concept of being able to switch games to the Japanese voices. And I found that to be a very fun feature to have because it's an easy way to make the game feel different in a good way. And because I've played the Sonic games with the Japanese voices before, I am very familiar with Sonic's Japanese voice, so being able to listen to it in Brawl is pretty cool.
The winner is Sonic!
All the voices are stored in a single file, so all you have to do is include the file in the ISO and tell the executable to load it, which can be done quickly with a cheat code. The biggest problem I faced when trying to bring all of this together is that I couldn't find a way to rebuild the game's ISO without losing the partitions. Every Wii disc comes with at least 2 partitions, one for system updates and one for the game itself. System updates have practically no purpose anymore, especially if you're using a USB loader. Removing it actually saves a lot of space. But in the case of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, there's a total of 12 partitions dedicated to each of the Virtual Console demos. The program commonly used to modify Wii images is called WIT. It is extremely useful, but I've never been able to successfully get it to rebuild Brawl without losing the masterpieces. The documentation does say it's possible, but either way I found a much faster method to do what I want, by using the very old program WiiScrubber. With WiiScrubber you can open the ISO and remove the update partition, replace the padding files with an empty file to save several hundred megabytes, and it lets you replace the main.dol with the removal of the temporary files and the addition of SDHC support. And one of the bonus things I like to change is to replace 2 songs in the game that were, in a way, downgraded due to licensing issues, I guess. The songs I replace are Snake Eater and His World to include the actual vocals. In the sound folder, there's an unused file for some Animal Crossing thing. This is the file I use to include the Japanese voices because WiiScrubber can't add new files to the ISO. And the final thing, which is a bit questionable, is I replaced the main.dol of every Virtual Console partition to enhance them for the fun of it. For NES demos, I replaced the dark color palette, which also breaks the integrity of the save states used to start these games, so they will now start at the title screen. I also removed the timer, so in the case of games like Donkey Kong and Ice Climber, you get the full experience here. For Super NES demos, I run them through my SNES VC Booster tool, which increases the volume, enables Wii Remote support, and gives them proper GameCube controller mappings. For Nintendo 64 demos, I simply remove the timer, which is great for Star Fox, but for Ocarina of Time I would recommend the GameCube versions because they have less slowdowns and better GameCube controller support, not to mention you can get all the Virtual Console benefits by using Devolution to play the game. Well, that's it. This is my way of improving the original vanilla Brawl experience without sacrificing anything. I think it's fascinating how much Brawl modding has improved over the years, but still never had a clear solution to the problems I mentioned. I don't think many people are even aware of what Brawl does to the Wii system memory, because not a lot of games do that. There's a single Neo Geo Virtual Console game that does it. The King of Fighters 98, and the DS port of Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Echoes of Time. These titles take a very long time to start, it's really bad. As far as I've tested, the entire King of Fighters game is stored in memory, leaving no room for the electronic manual, so it has to free up sub-memory for it. But returning to the game means that it also needs to get that chunk of the game back into memory, which is a very slow process because the game is encrypted and compressed heavily. So to speed it up, it creates a lightly compressed 20 megabyte file that contains the missing chunk of the game. If you make it fail to create this file, it will still work, but it will be much slower. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy definitely needs its temporary files to exist, otherwise it will crash. But in conclusion, yeah, I think Brawl is the best game in the series.